Hey there, Twisters. So let's talk about 10 wingers who I think could break out in the 2023-24 NHL season. And just like my centers video that I put out a couple days ago, which you should watch, just see the pinned comment down below. With this video, I hope it's helpful for you identifying some players out there that you might not know so much about. Or on the flip side of things, if you play fantasy hockey, you might want to consider drafting some of these players a little bit earlier than they're ranked, because I think that they'll experience large jumps in terms of offensive production in the upcoming season. So these are just my 10 picks. There are going to be plenty of honorable mentions and snubs. So let me know who I left out in the comments down below, and stick around for more content in the offseason here. And I'm defining a breakout performance as somebody who's not a rookie, okay, that's very important, and someone who's 25 and under. So they have a little bit of NHL experience under their belt, but this is where we see them take a significant step forward in the upcoming season, especially when it comes to offensive productivity, because we are talking about kind of like fantasy hockey here. Let's kick things off here. We're actually going to start with two wingers on the same team. That's the Columbus Blue Jackets. This is a team that should be more competitive in the upcoming season. They've made some defensive upgrades, so hopefully they won't be hemmed into their own zone all that much. And they have lots of young talent out there. And certainly when you have the possibility of somebody like Patrick Laine playing center for the upcoming year, we'll see what happens in the preseason. That opens another spot in the top 6 for a winger. So there are two players that I definitely want to highlight here. First of all, Kirill Marchenko. He was on a crazy run to open up last season. Ended up with 21 goals in 59 games and just 4 assists. But even so, he was a sniper out there, a 16.0 shot percentage. 7 of those goals were on the power play. So that's something you have to take into consideration when playing fantasy hockey. And on the other side of things, you have Kent Johnson, the 5th overall pick just 2 years ago, part of that crazy good Michigan draft class. We've seen what he's done at the elite levels of competition outside of the NHL leading up to this point. 79 games last season for his first full year, 16 goals and 24 assists for 40 points. His power play production was pretty good as well, with 5 goals and 7 assists. All right, third on my list, I've got Quinton Byfield for the LA Kings. You have, of course, Kopitar, Dubois, and Danault down the middle. So that top 9 group of forwards will be excellent. And here's a chance for Quinton Byfield to play maybe on the first or second line for a full season. Last year in 53 games, just 3 goals and 19 assists. I don't necessarily expect him to be like a 90 or 100 point player in the next couple of seasons. However, he does have a very good all-around skill set. He was a little snake bit last year with just a 4.1 shot percentage, but playing with Anze Kopitar and perhaps, a Victor Arvidsson out there, Kevin Fiala, Adrian Kempe, that's probably one guy that he could certainly pair with. He's going to flourish based off of that, and you could even expand this to include somebody like Arthur Kaliev. So again, the Kings are a loaded forward group, and they'll be putting in lots of goals this upcoming year. But I think that he can easily make that jump from 22 points to maybe doubling that, or perhaps beyond in the upcoming season. He's the former 2nd overall draft pick from just a couple of years ago. All right, fourth, this is a guy who's already proven himself. He kind of broke out last year in terms of goals, but his team around him is only getting better as well, and that's Dawson Mercer for the New Jersey Devils. A full 82 games, 27 goals, and 29 assists with almost a 17% shooting percentage. And again, the talent around him, you've got Jesper Bratt only getting better, Nico Hischier only getting better, Jack Hughes. You bring in Timo Meier last year, a 40-goal scorer. You bring in Tyler Toffoli in the offseason. This top 6 is going to be absolutely loaded. And so I think that Mercer could be that 35-goal scorer for them next season, and perhaps beyond that. He could be easily a 70-point player on this team in just his 3rd season in the NHL. All right, now let's talk about 2 players that were on my list last year, but I'm going to bring them back even though they didn't quite break out last season, and I'll explain why. So first of all, Cole Caulfield for the Montreal Canadiens. He only played 46 games last year. He had 10 goals and 26 assists. Now, Nick Suzuki actually still had a very productive season despite not having his winger there. And so with Suzuki actually setting a career high last year without Caulfield for a big stretch, I think that Cole Caulfield could have himself maybe a 35-goal season, as I was just talking about with Mercer, and being around that 70 to 75 point mark. The Canadiens were making some progress last season despite some injuries, and so I think that they're due to continue progressing in the right direction, even if that doesn't translate into the win column. The other player who was on my list last year who I want to bring back is Seth Jarvis for the Hurricanes. Now, he did regress this past season. I was surprised to see that. He had 14 goals and 25 assists. He was snakebit with his shot percentage at just 7.5%, less than half of the previous season. But Jarvis, I think, really redeemed himself very well in the playoffs. He had 5 goals and 5 assists in 15 games. He threw 42 hits. He's not a big guy out there, but he certainly played above his weight, kind of like a Connor Garland. And I think that the opportunity for him to play on that top line with Svechnikov and Aho this upcoming season, I remember him playing with Aho quite a bit in the postseason. I think he's going to flourish and redeem himself, maybe be around the 55 to 60 point mark. I really like this player. He's very good in all three zones, and I think he's going to be a key reason as to why the Hurricanes will compete for that division again. The seventh winger I have here is Philip Tomasino for the Predators. Now, I talked about a couple of Nashville centers, and now we'll actually add a winger to that group as well. The Preds are getting younger. A lot of those forwards played a big role in them almost competing for a playoff spot last year. Luke Evangelista was also a part of that, but he only played 24 games, so he's not going to be eligible for this list. But Tomasino, his rookie season, 76 games, 11 goals and 21 assists. He did regress this past season, but there's a lot of upside for him as a former first-round draft pick. And you have to think of it this way with Nashville's top line. You have Ryan O'Reilly now. You have Philip Forsberg returning to the lineup and all his offensive gifts. There's a spot open there that Tomasino could possibly take with a good training camp. Evangelista could also be in that mix as well. All right, eighth on my list, I've got Cole Perfetti for the Jets. This is a guy who was drafted, I believe, as a center, but so far in the NHL has played wing. You bring in Gabe Vilardi in that Dubois deal, and so you actually open up a spot at wing, perhaps on the second line, if they bump Niederreiter down to the third line. And I think that he can actually service that role pretty well. So Perfetti could have that opportunity with Vilardi, who broke out fairly well last year. He was actually in my centers video in addition to Iafallo. So I do like the potential there. 51 games before getting injured this past season, 8 goals, 22 assists for the former 10th overall pick. So I think that he could certainly take that a step forward, be maybe a 45 to 50 point player, and hopefully he can help the Jets remain competitive if they want to stay in the playoff race. All right, ninth on my list. This one's really simple here. So Taylor Radish for the Blackhawks. Radish, 20 goals and 17 assists for arguably the worst team in the NHL this last year. There's a spot there on the top line with Taylor Hall now coming over in that trade from the Bruins. And you've got Connor Bedard as well. So here's a great opportunity for Radish to be a 50-plus point player in this next upcoming season. I think that that's kind of the path of logic here. And before I get into my 10th winger or wingers, let's call out a bunch of honorable mentions. So Arthur Kaliev, I talked about him for LA. He could break out. He was on my list last year, but didn't really do that this past season. But again, I think that LA is really stacked at forwards. Maybe somebody on the Red Wings. Now, Michael Rasmussen had 29 points in 56 games in a fairly reduced role compared to some of the top players out there like Lucas Raymond. So I don't know, maybe somebody for Detroit takes that step forward. Jonathan Berggren is another name to call out as well. Raymond, he did have that crazy good rookie season, but then he regressed. Can he get back to that point? I hope so, but I don't know if he's going to, be like a 75-point player in this upcoming year. Then you have Matthias Michelli, who was part of that Calder Trophy race last season for the Coyotes. 49 points. I mean, if he's playing with Clayton Keller for the whole season, then maybe he does become a 60, 65-point player, but I'm not entirely sold on him just yet, taking that step forward in just the span of 1 year. JJ Peterka for a loaded Buffalo Sabres forward group. I like Ty Dellandrea quite a bit. I don't think the numbers indicate just how skilled he is, but he is an up-and-comer, I believe, in the NHL, even though he's not playing top-line minutes because Dallas is so stacked in that respect. Brandon Hagel had 64 points last year. He had 31 goals. I don't know if he's going to do much more on top of that, but he's still a developing young forward out there. Drake Batherson, I like him quite a bit. He had 62 points this last season. I think he'll certainly have a case to be better than that in the upcoming year. But again, is he going to be like 80, 85 next season? I'm not going to be as bold with that prediction. I like A2 Losterinen, and last year he had 43 points. I consider him a good all-zone winger out there. But just given his role, I don't know if he's going to be like a 60-point player in the NHL. Paul Cotter for the Golden Knights played in 55 games last year, third line, fourth line role, and had 13 goals. Kind of came out of nowhere and produced pretty darn well for the Knights. I don't know if he's going to be like a 20-goal scorer or anything, but don't completely sleep on him. I would have Jack Quinn here for the Sabres as well, but he's got an Achilles injury, or he's recovering from surgery there, so he's going to be out for too long to actually put him on this list. And I hope that as a Sharks fan, Fabian Zetterlund, previously of the Devils, or Philip Zadina, previously of the Red Wings, now both are Sharks. I hope one of them could make his way onto this list, so then that way he's a good trade deadline asset so the Sharks can get better draft picks. All right, so 10th, you saw the hat here. I've got either, or maybe even both, Alexis Lafreniere, former number 1 overall pick, or Capo Caco, former number 2 overall pick. So these guys have typically played on that kid line with Philip Hedl. That was their third line. Now, of course, Tarasenko and Kane are no longer part of the organization. And so even though they brought in Blake Wheeler, at least one of these guys has to play in the top 6. And you might argue that Philip Hedl could actually compete with Vincent Trocheck to take over that second line center. So definitely keep your eye on both of these players. And I mentioned both of them kind of in the same breath, in the sense that their numbers are like almost identical. So Kakko, 82 games, 18 goals, 22 assists, and a 15-18 average time on ice. And for Lafreniere, 15-13 average time on ice, 81 games, 16 goals, 23 assists. And neither of these guys have really done much on the power play so far, or at least as we look at last year. But I do expect that to change in the upcoming year with Kane and Tarasenko no longer being on the roster. And yeah, the Rangers, of course, are going to need more firepower from their young players to support their veteran talent that's still producing at a pretty good clip out there. Anyway, guys, who is the biggest snub on this list? Is there somebody else I didn't cover who would be eligible for a breakout performance per my list? Let me know in the comments down below, and stick around for more content during the offseason. Let me know if you have any ideas for future topics that we can cover here. Hit the thumbs up because that will help the channel, and subscribe if you want more stuff like this. And yeah, you can also follow me on social media. More on that in the video description below. All right, Twisters, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Nick, and I'll catch you later. Ciao for now.